The boy slept hugging a locket, and the millionaire broke down when he saw who was in the photo. Richard Parker had arrived at St. Vincent Shelter just to fulfill a promise made to his wife before she passed away. The donation boxes were organized in the car trunk, and his intention was to drop everything off quickly and leave, as he had always done in the last 15 years of non-stop work. That's when his eyes landed on a small figure curled up on a mattress in the corner of the room. The boy must have been about 10 years old and was sleeping soundly, hugging something that glowed faintly against his chest. Richard approached slowly, driven by a curiosity he couldn't explain. When he could clearly see the object, his world collapsed. Inside the golden locket was the face of Samantha, his daughter, whom he hadn't seen for 15 years. The man's heart raced, his legs faltered, and he had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. How was it possible? How did that boy have a picture of his daughter? His hands trembled as he observed the child's serene face, searching for some familiar trait that could confirm what his mind refused to accept. "Are you all right?" Sister Catherine's soft voice brought him back to reality. The shelter coordinator had approached, concerned by the look of shock on the businessman's face. Richard couldn't answer immediately. He discreetly pointed to the boy, who was still sleeping. "Who is he?" he managed to whisper, his voice choked with emotion. "Ethan James. He arrived here 7 years ago, just a little 3-year-old. A woman brought him, said she couldn't take care of him anymore, and asked us not to ask questions. She was very sick, poor thing." Richard's world stopped. 7 years ago. That meant the boy had arrived at the shelter in 2016. At the time when Samantha had left home pregnant, furious with him for not accepting the boyfriend he considered unsuitable for his daughter. "The woman, what was she like?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sister Catherine sighed as if that memory still caused her pain. "Very young, brown hair, green eyes, too thin, looked like she hadn't eaten properly for months. She said his name was Ethan James, but didn't want to give a last name or the child's documents. Promised to come back when she got better, but she never showed up again." Each word was like a stab in Richard's chest. Samantha had always said that if she had a son, she would name him Ethan James after her paternal grandfather. And the description was exactly like his daughter at 20 years old. At that moment, the boy stirred. His eyes opened slowly, and Richard saw with absolute clarity the same green eyes as Samantha looking back at him. The boy noticed the adult's presence and quickly hid the locket inside his shirt. "Hi, Ethan James," Sister Catherine said affectionately. "This is Mr. Richard. He came to bring some donations for you all." The boy sat up in bed, still sleepy but already in a defensive posture. Richard noticed that despite his young age, there was a premature maturity in the child's eyes, like someone who had learned to protect himself very early. "Hi," murmured Ethan James, not taking his eyes off the grey-haired man who was watching him intently. Richard crouched down to be at the boy's level, fighting the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "Hi, Ethan James, that's a beautiful name. Do you remember who gave it to you?" The boy's expression closed off immediately. "I don't like to talk about that." "That's okay," Richard tried to keep his voice gentle. "And that locket? It's beautiful." Ethan James instinctively brought his hand to his chest, protecting the object. "It's mine. My mother gave it to me." "Your mother must be very special to have given you something so beautiful." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he held them back. She was the most special person in the world, but she had to leave. Richard felt his heart shatter. He had to make a superhuman effort not to pick up the boy and tell him everything. But he knew he couldn't be hasty. He needed to be sure, and more importantly, he needed to earn the child's trust. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, Sister Catherine noticed the tension in the air and suggested they go to her office to talk. Richard was reluctant to leave Ethan James, but he knew he needed more information before making any decision. "You seem very shaken," the nun commented as soon as they sat down. "Do you know the boy?" Richard took a deep breath. He needed to be honest, at least partially. "I think I might know his mother. You said she arrived 7 years ago, sick? Yes, she was very weak, coughing a lot. It seemed like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. She cried a lot when she handed over Ethan James, said it was the hardest thing she'd ever done in her life, but that she had no choice. Did she leave any documents? Any way to contact her? None. At the time, we thought it was strange, but she begged us not to ask questions. She said if she managed to get better, she'd come back for her son. She only left a letter for him, with instructions to give it to him when he turned 15. Richard's heart raced. A letter? Can I see it? It's kept in the safe. His mother gave very specific instructions. But why all this interest? Do you really know her? Richard closed his eyes. The pain of the last 15 years surged like an avalanche. Sister Catherine, I believe Ethan James is my grandson. The silence that followed seemed eternal. The nun looked at him with a mixture of surprise and compassion. My God, are you sure? The woman who brought him, I think she was my daughter, Samantha. We fought 15 years ago when she got pregnant. I didn't accept her boyfriend, thought she was throwing her life away. I said terrible things, and she left home promising she'd never come back. Sister Catherine brought her hand to her chest, moved. And you never tried to look for her again? I tried, in the first few years, but my pride was greater than anything. I thought she'd come back when her anger passed. When I realized that would never happen, it was already too late. I couldn't find her. And now you think she... I don't know. But I need to find out. This boy might be all I have left of her. Sister Catherine was thoughtful for a long moment. Mr. Richard, you need to understand something. Ethan James is a child who has already suffered a lot of abandonment. If you're not absolutely sure, or if you're not prepared to take on this responsibility, it's better to leave things as they are. I understand. But I need to know the truth. Is there any way to confirm it? Well, you could request a DNA test, but that would involve legal matters, and the boy would have to know what's happening. Richard shook his head. Not yet. First, I need to earn his trust, and I need to find out more about what happened to Samantha. I can help however possible, but promise me you won't raise Ethan James's expectations until you're sure of everything. I promise. When they returned to the common room, Ethan James was playing with other children, but Richard noticed he always kept one hand protecting the locket. The businessman approached slowly and sat on the floor at the children's level. Can I play with you? The other children were excited by the adult's presence, but Ethan James remained reserved. Richard spent the whole afternoon there, observing every gesture, every expression of the boy. The more he watched him, the more certain he was that he was looking at his grandson. The boy had the same dark, straight hair as Samantha when she was little, the same way of furrowing his brow when he was concentrating, the same stubbornness to defend what he considered important. It was like seeing Samantha at 10 years old. When it was time to leave, Richard said goodbye to all the children, but gave a special look to Ethan James. It was really nice to meet you, Ethan James. Can I come back to visit you? The boy shrugged, trying to seem indifferent, but Richard saw a spark of interest in his green eyes. If you want. On the way out, Sister Catherine handed Richard a piece of paper with her phone number. If you find out anything, let me know. And remember, take it slow. Ethan has already built many walls to protect himself. Richard drove home on autopilot, his mind buzzing with thoughts and emotions. When he reached the empty apartment, he went straight to the office and opened the drawer he had locked 15 years ago. There were all the photos of Samantha, from a baby up to 20 years old. He picked up a photo of her at 10 years old and placed it next to the mental image of Ethan James. The resemblance was undeniable, not just in the physical features, but in the expression, the posture, the way of looking at the world with a mix of distrust and hope. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept looking at the photos of Samantha and thinking about everything he had lost. If Ethan James really was his grandson, that meant Samantha had tried to come home 7 years ago. Sick, alone, with nowhere to go. And he hadn't even known. The guilt was overwhelming. How many nights had Samantha stayed up, taking care of a small baby all by herself? How many times had she thought about reaching out to her father, but remembered the harsh words he had said? How many times had she looked at her son and seen in him the family she had lost? The next morning, Richard called his office and cancelled all his appointments for the week. He needed to focus on finding out the truth. He started by making some calls to old acquaintances, trying to find someone who had heard from Samantha in recent years. That's when he remembered Mrs. Jenkins, the family's former housekeeper, who had worked for them for over 20 years. She had always had a special affection for Samantha, and maybe she knew something. He found her number in the old address book and called. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is Richard Parker." "My God, Mr. Richard, it's been so long. How are you?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Jenkins. Listen, I need to ask you something very important. Have you heard from Samantha in recent years?" The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "Mr. Richard, why are you asking this now?" "Please, Mrs. Jenkins, it's very important. She came to me about 8 years ago. She was pregnant, very thin, looked like she wasn't eating right." Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "And what happened? Why didn't you tell me?" "She made me promise not to tell you anything. She said she had tried to come back a few times, but always gave up at the last minute. She was afraid of being rejected again." My God. "And then?" "She came to see me a few times after the baby was born. A beautiful boy, just like her. But she was getting thinner and thinner, coughing a lot. I tried to convince her to reach out to you, but she said it was already too late." "Did she say where she lived? Who she was with?" "She lived in a boarding house downtown, alone with the boy. The child's father had disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. She worked when she could, but it was hard with a small baby." Richard was shaking with emotion and anger at himself. "And then? When was the last time you saw her?" "About 7 years ago. She showed up here in the middle of the night, very sick, with the boy in her arms. She said she couldn't take care of him properly and was going to leave him in a safe place until she got better. That was the last time I saw her. Mrs. Jenkins, I think I found my grandson." "My God! Where?" "In a shelter. The description matches everything you just told me." "Thank God. I always prayed that you would find each other one day." After hanging up, Richard stood still for several minutes, processing everything he had discovered. Samantha had been so close for so long, and he had no idea. She had faced hardships, raised a child alone, gotten sick, all while he buried himself in work to forget the pain of separation. Now he was almost certain that Ethan James was his grandson, but there was still one piece of the puzzle that worried him. What had happened to Samantha after she left the boy at the shelter? He decided he needed to earn Ethan James's trust before revealing anything. He returned to the shelter the next day, this time bringing some children's books and games. "Look who's back," said Sister Catherine with a smile. "I promised I'd return, and I brought some things for the children." Ethan James was sitting alone in a corner, watching the other children play. Richard approached slowly. "Hi, Ethan James, I brought some books. Do you like to read?" The boy looked at the books with interest, but still kept a defensive posture. "Sometimes it depends on the book." "And what kind of books do you like?" "My mum used to read adventure stories to me. Before she got sick." Richard felt his heart tighten, but kept his voice steady. "She must have been a very special mother." "She was the best mum in the world," said Ethan James, his voice choked. "She always said I was the most important thing in her life. I'm sure she meant it. Mothers always love their children, even when they have to make tough decisions." Ethan James looked at Richard with curiosity. "Do you have children?" The question caught Richard off guard. How to explain his situation without revealing everything? "I had a daughter, but we were separated a long time ago because of a fight." "And you didn't try to make up?" The innocence of the question cut Richard like a blade. "I tried, but not in the right way, and now it might be too late. My mom always said it's never too late to truly apologize." Richard had to turn his face to hide the tears threatening to escape. Even in the advice of a 10-year-old, he recognized Samantha's wisdom. "Your mother was very wise." "Yeah, she understood everything. That's why I don't get why she had to leave without me. Sometimes adults make decisions that don't seem to make sense, but it's because they're trying to protect those they love. Ethan James became thoughtful for a moment. Do you think she'll come back one day? The question was the one Richard feared most. How to explain to a child that his mother had probably passed away forever. I think she'll always be with you, even if not in the way you'd like. Ethan James brought his hand to the locket. That's why I keep her picture here, so I don't forget her face. Can I see the picture? The boy hesitated, but something in Richard's sincere gaze made him trust. He carefully opened the locket and showed the small photo inside. Richard had to control himself not to react visibly. It was Samantha, exactly as he remembered her at 20. The same sweet smile, the same eyes full of life. The photo was a bit faded, but you could still clearly see the features he knew so well. She's very beautiful, he managed to say, his voice hoarse with emotion. She was the most beautiful woman in the world. Everyone said so. You look a lot like her. Ethan James smiled for the first time since Richard had met him. Really, everyone says that. It's true, you have her eyes, her smile. I bet you have her kind heart too. The boy carefully closed the locket and put it back inside his shirt. Thank you for saying that. It's been a while since anyone talked about my mom with me. Whenever you want to talk about her, I'll listen. At that moment, Sister Catherine approached. Ethan James, it's lunchtime. Would you like to call the other children? The boy got up and ran off to notify the others. Sister Catherine took the opportunity to speak with Richard. He seems different today, more open. You have a way with children. I'm trying to earn his trust. I've discovered some things about his mother that confirm my suspicions. Would you like to talk about it after lunch? Yes, thank you. During lunch, Richard observed Ethan James interacting with the other children. Although reserved, he was respected by his peers. He displayed a maturity beyond his years, yet also moments of pure childhood innocence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now, continuing. After lunch, Richard told Sister Catherine about his conversation with Mrs. Jenkins. The nun listened quietly, nodding her head occasionally. It really does seem he is your grandson, she said at the end. And now? What do you plan to do? I want to keep visiting him to build a bond. When I feel he trusts me, I'll tell him the truth. And if he doesn't accept it, then I'll respect his decision. But at least I'll know my grandson is well and not alone in the world. May I make a suggestion? Of course. How about if you started helping out regularly here at the shelter? That way you could spend more time with him naturally, without it seeming like you're focusing only on him. That's a great idea. What can I do? Well, we always need help with the children's homework, and you seem to have a knack for talking with them. Perfect. I can come 3 times a week. And so began a new routine in Richard's life. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, he was at the shelter, helping the children with their schoolwork and joining in activities. But secretly, every moment there was focused on getting to know Ethan James better. As the weeks passed, the boy gradually opened up. He began seeking out Richard for help with math homework, where he showed exceptional intelligence. He also shared small memories of his mother, always touching the locket when speaking about her. One afternoon, while solving math problems together, Ethan James asked a question that caught Richard off guard. Mr. Richard, do you know my last name? Why do you ask? It's just that at school they're asking for documents for a field trip, and I only have the name Ethan James. Sister Catherine said my mother didn't leave a last name. Richard felt his heart race. The moment had come to start revealing the truth. Ethan James, may I ask you a question? Go ahead. Do you remember your mother's full name? The boy became thoughtful. I remember some people called her Samantha, but she always told me to just call her Mom. Richard had to control himself not to show the emotion he felt. Samantha is a beautiful name. Do you know if she had family? I think so. Sometimes she would get sad and say she missed her father, but when I asked, she would change the subject. And have you ever wanted to meet your family? Sometimes I think about it, but I'm also scared. Scared of what? What if they don't want me? What if that's why my mother left her home? The question pierced Richard's heart. That was exactly what had happened, and now he needed to find a way to fix the mistake without further traumatizing the boy. Ethan James, sometimes adults make very big mistakes, and sometimes it takes them a long time to realize they were wrong. What do you mean? Well, imagine a father argues with his daughter because he thinks he's protecting her, but actually, he's being proud and stubborn. The daughter leaves and he stays angry instead of going after her. Years later, he realizes he lost what he loved most in life because of his own pride. Ethan James listened carefully. So, what happens then? Then he spends the rest of his life regretting and trying to find a way to ask for forgiveness. But if he looks for his daughter and she forgives him, can't they be okay again? Yes, they can. But sometimes, when we take too long to ask for forgiveness, it might be too late. Ethan James remained silent for a long time, absorbing the story. Mr. Parker, is this story about you and your daughter? The direct question surprised Richard. The boy was more perceptive than he had imagined. Yes, Ethan James, it's exactly about me and my daughter. And why don't you go after her? Because I think she's no longer here for me to ask for forgiveness. Ethan James touched the locket, as he always did when he was emotional. It's like my mom, right? She left too. It's similar, yes. You know what I think, Mr. Parker? What do you think? I think even when people leave, they leave a little piece of themselves with us, like this photo I keep, and I think they also take a little piece of us with them. The boy's wisdom moved Richard deeply. You're very smart, Ethan James. Did your mother teach you to think like that? She always said that love never ends, it just changes form, and that we're never truly alone if we have someone in our heart. Richard could no longer contain himself. Tears began to stream down his face. Sorry, he said, trying to compose himself. It's just that you remind me a lot of someone I loved very much. Ethan James looked at him affectionately. Your daughter? Yes, my daughter. I think she forgave you, Mr. Parker. Mothers always forgive. At that moment, Richard made a decision. He could no longer hide the truth. Ethan James deserved to know who he really was. Ethan James, I need to tell you something very important. But do you promise you'll listen to me until the end? The boy sensed the seriousness of the moment and nodded. I promise. No, I'm almost certain that your mother was my daughter. Ethan James looked at him without understanding. What do you mean? My daughter's name was Samantha. She left home 15 years ago, pregnant, after a fight with me. I never saw her again. And now, seeing you, knowing your story, I think Samantha was your mother, and that you are my grandson. The silence that followed seemed eternal. Ethan James stared at him, trying to process the information. Is this true? I believe so, but we can only be sure if you want to take a test to confirm. And if it's true, what happens to me? If it's true and if you want, you would have a family again. You would have a grandfather who loves you more than anything in the world. Ethan James touched the locket and remained silent for several minutes. Richard respected the time he needed to think. Can I see the locket again? Richard asked gently. Ethan James opened the locket and showed the photo. Richard took out an old photo of Samantha at the same age from his pocket. This here is a photo of my daughter when she was 20 years old. Can you see any resemblance? Ethan James looked from one photo to the other, and his eyes widened. It's the same person. Yes, Ethan James. It's the same person. Tears began to stream down the boy's face. So you really are my grandfather? I think so. But I need you to understand one thing. I made a terrible mistake with your mother. I was proud, stubborn, and ended up losing her. I don't want you to think I'm a good person just because I'm your grandfather. Ethan James looked at him through the tears. But you're here now. And you're kind to me. My mother always said that what matters is what we do today, not what we did yesterday. Richard could no longer hold back and began to cry too. He opened his arms and Ethan James threw himself into them, still holding the locket. I'm sorry, Ethan James. I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner. I'm so sorry your mother had to go through everything alone. But we've found each other now, the boy murmured against Richard's chest. And she's here in the locket, watching everything. They remained embraced for a long time, crying together over all the pain and longing of the past years. When they finally separated, both felt more relieved than they had in a long time. "What now?" asked Ethan James. "Now we'll do the tests to be absolutely sure. And if it confirms what I already know in my heart, we'll take care of all the paperwork for you to leave here and come live with me. If you want, of course." "I do want to. But can I still visit everyone here?" "Of course you can. In fact, I'll continue helping here too. This place took care of you when I couldn't. It's the least I can do." Ethan James smiled, and Richard saw Samantha in that smile. "Can I call you Grandpa?" "Yes, you can. In fact, I'd love it if you called me Grandpa." At that moment, Sister Catherine appeared in the room. She had overheard part of the conversation and was moved. "So it's really true?" she asked. "We still need to confirm with tests, but I'm certain," Richard replied. "What joy! Ethan James, are you happy?" The boy nodded, still hugging his newly discovered grandfather. "Yes, I am. And I think my mother is too." The following days were a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Richard arranged for DNA tests through a private lab, ensuring the results would be ready as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, he began preparing his home to welcome Ethan James. Richard's apartment was spacious but cold and impersonal. He had spent years immersed in work, not caring about his living environment. Now, for the first time in 15 years, he worried about making the place welcoming. He bought furniture for Ethan James's room, letting the boy himself choose colors and decorations. He installed a bookshelf, a study desk, and even a small altar where Ethan James could place a photo of his mother. "Grandpa, can I take the locket to my new room?" Ethan James asked during one of his visits. "Of course you can. Actually, I have an idea. How about we make a beautiful frame with a larger photo of your mother for your room? You can keep wearing the locket always." The boy's eyes sparkled. "That's a great idea. That way she'll always be nearby." 3 days later, the test results arrived. Richard was at the shelter when Sister Catherine received the call from the lab. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. "Probability of relationship, 99.9%, she read aloud. Ethan James jumped for joy. "So it's true, you're really my grandpa?" Richard picked him up and spun him around, both laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, it's true. You're my grandson, and I'll take care of you forever." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The legal process for the custody transfer took a few weeks, but Richard managed to speed everything up through his lawyers. During this period, Ethan James spent weekends at the new house, gradually getting used to the change. One afternoon, while organizing the boys' belongings, Ethan James found an old box in the closet. "Grandpa, what's in this box?" Richard recognized it immediately. It was the box where he kept everything related to Samantha. "These are your mother's things, photos, letters, memories. Would you like to see?" Ethan James nodded excitedly. They sat on the floor and began exploring the box's contents. There were photos of Samantha from infancy to her 20s, drawings she made in school, letters she had sent to her father when she was little and traveling with her grandmother. "Wow, she really was beautiful," exclaimed Ethan James, flipping through the photos. "And I really look like her." "Very much. Sometimes when you smile, it's as if she were here in the room." At the bottom of the box, Ethan James found a sealed envelope. "What is this?" Richard took the envelope and examined it. It said, "To my father," in Samantha's handwriting. "I think it's a letter your mother wrote to me, but never had the courage to send." "Can you open it?" With trembling hands, Richard carefully opened the envelope. Inside were 2 handwritten pages. "Dad, I know you're surprised to receive this letter. I also know you're still hurt with me for leaving home the way I did. But I need you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think of you and miss you. Ethan James was born 2 months ago. He's a beautiful, healthy boy, and he has your green eyes. Every day he reminds me of you, and every day I think about coming home. But I know you haven't forgiven me yet, and I don't want to expose my son to rejection. I'm raising him alone. His father left us when he found out about the pregnancy, just as you predicted. But I don't regret anything, Dad. Ethan James is the most precious thing that has ever happened in my life. I want you to know that I understand your anger. You always wanted the best for me, and I chose a path you didn't approve of. But I also want you to know that your words still hurt my heart. When you said I was no longer your daughter, a part of me broke. If you ever want to meet your grandson, I'll be here. If you ever want to forgive me, know that I forgave you a long time ago. A daughter's love for her father never ends, even when everything else seems lost. With all my love, Samantha. Richard couldn't finish reading the letter aloud. Tears fell on the paper, blurring some words. Ethan James approached and hugged him. She loved you very much, Grandpa. And I loved her too, but I was too proud to show it. But now you can show me, and I'll tell her in the locket that you've forgiven each other. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept rereading Samantha's letter and thinking about how things could have been different if he had swallowed his pride and looked for his daughter. Ethan James could have grown up surrounded by love. Samantha wouldn't have struggled, and they could have been a happy family. But he also understood that it was no use regretting the past. What mattered now was doing his best for his grandson, honoring Samantha's memory, and giving Ethan James all the love he deserved. The following week, the official moving day finally arrived. Ethan James said goodbye to everyone at the shelter, promising to visit often. Sister Catherine was emotional but happy to see that the boy finally had a family. "Take good care of him," she told Richard at the farewell. "I'll protect him with my life," Richard replied, "and thank you for taking care of him when I couldn't. It was a privilege. He's a special boy." When they arrived home, Ethan James ran to his new room and threw himself on the bed. "Is all of this really mine?" "All yours. This is your home now." The boy took the locket from his neck and carefully placed it on the nightstand, next to the framed photo of his mother. "Hi, Mom," he whispered to the photo. "We're home." Richard watched from the doorway, moved. At that moment, he felt that Samantha was really there, approving the union between father and grandson. The first few months were an adjustment. Ethan James had to change schools, and Richard had to learn to balance work with late fatherhood. But both worked hard to build a harmonious routine. Richard drastically reduced his work hours, delegating more responsibilities to his employees. For the first time in years, he was leaving the office at 5 in the afternoon to pick up Ethan James from school. "Grandpa, you're not going to go broke from working less?" Ethan James joked one afternoon. "On the contrary. I think I'll gain much more being with you than staying at the office late." "What do you mean?" "There's a wealth that can't be measured in money, Ethan James. It's the wealth of having a family, of having someone to love and care for. That's what I had been missing for 15 years. Ethan James smiled. "My mother always said that the most important things in life don't cost money. Your mother was very wise, and she taught you well." One day, Ethan James came home from school quieter than usual. Richard noticed something was bothering the boy. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school?" "Grandpa, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why did you and my mum fight? What really happened?" Richard knew this question would come one day, but he wasn't prepared for it. "It's a complicated story, Ethan James. Are you sure you want to know?" "I am. I want to understand." Richard took a deep breath and began to tell the whole truth. He explained how Samantha had fallen in love with a young man he considered irresponsible, how he had forbidden the relationship, how she had disobeyed and gotten pregnant, and how he, driven by anger and disappointment, had said terrible words that sent his daughter away from home. "I said that if she chose that young man, she was no longer my daughter. I said she was throwing her life away and wouldn't have my support. They were the cruelest words I ever said in my life, and I regret them every day." Ethan James listened to everything in silence. "And why didn't you go after her?" "Because I was proud and stubborn. I thought she would come back asking for forgiveness. When I realized that was never going to happen, too much time had passed, and I didn't know where to look." "But were you worried about her?" "I was desperate. I could barely sleep thinking about whether she was okay, if she had enough to eat, where she was living. But my pride was greater than my worry. Ethan James was thoughtful for a long time. "Grandpa, do you think she died because she was sad?" The question broke Richard's heart. It was something that had tormented him since he found out about Ethan James. "I don't know, my grandson. I only know she was sick when she left you at the shelter. But I think she passed away knowing she had raised a wonderful boy, and that she had a lot of love in her heart, even with all the pain." "Do you think she forgives me for coming to live with you?" "I'm absolutely sure she's happy seeing that you have a family again. The letter she wrote proves that she wanted us to reconcile." Ethan James got up and went to his room. He returned a few minutes later with the locket in his hand. "I want to give you something, Grandpa." "What is it?" Ethan James held out the locket. "I want you to keep the photo of my mom for one night, so you two can talk and truly make peace." Richard was moved by the gesture. "Are you sure? I know how important this locket is to you." "I'm sure. You need to ask for her forgiveness, and she needs to forgive you. Then both of you will be at peace." With trembling hands, Richard took the locket and carefully opened it. Samantha's face looked back at him, young and full of life. That night, Richard stayed up late, holding the locket and talking mentally with his daughter. He asked forgiveness for all the harsh words, for all the lost years, for not being the father she deserved, and somehow he felt she was listening and forgiving him. The next morning he returned the locket to Ethan James. "So, did you talk?" "Yes, we did, and everything is okay between us now." Ethan James smiled. "That's good. Now we can be a truly happy family." The months that followed were the happiest of Richard's life. He rediscovered simple pleasures like helping with homework, taking Ethan James to the park, watching cartoons on television, things he had missed with Samantha and now could do with his grandson. Ethan James also flourished in the family environment. His grades at school improved, he made new friends, and his smile became a frequent sight on his face. He continued visiting the shelter regularly, now as a volunteer alongside his grandfather. One afternoon, while organizing some old photos to create a family album, Ethan James made a discovery that would change everything once again. "Grandpa, look at this." He was holding a slightly yellowed birth certificate. "What is it?" "It's my birth certificate. It was among the things I brought from the shelter. Look at my mother's name." Richard took the document and read it. The name was clearly written, Samantha White Parker. She had used her full name, including the family surname. "She never forgot she was your daughter, Grandpa, even after everything that happened." Richard hugged his grandson, moved. "And you are also a Parker, Ethan James. Ethan James White Parker. Now it's official." "I like the sound of that," said the boy, smiling. "Ethan James White Parker, grandson of Richard Parker and son of Samantha White Parker." That night, Richard made an important decision. He called his lawyer and began the process to officially include Ethan James in his will. He also set up an education fund for the boy and made significant donations to the St. Vincent shelter. "Why are you doing all this?" asked Ethan James when he found out. "Because I want to make sure you'll always be protected, no matter what happens, and I want to honor your mother's memory by helping other children who are in the same situation you were in." "Can I help too?" "Of course you can. In fact, I have an idea. How about we create a library at the shelter in honor of your mother? The Samantha White Parker Library." Ethan James's eyes lit up. "That's an amazing idea. She loved reading to me. Other children will get to have that joy too." And so they did. In the following months, grandfather and grandson worked together to create the most beautiful library the shelter had ever seen. They bought hundreds of books, colorful furniture, soft rugs, and even a special armchair for story time. On the opening day, the entire community was present. Ethan James gave a moving speech about the importance of reading and how his mother had planted in him the love for books. "This library is to honor my mother, Samantha White Parker, who taught me that through books we can travel anywhere and be anything. And it's also to thank my grandfather, Richard Parker, who showed me that it's never too late for a family to find each other. The audience was moved, and many people cried during the speech. Sister Catherine took the opportunity to share how important it had been for the shelter to find a family for Ethan James, and how that had brought hope to other children. After the ceremony, while the children explored the new library, Richard and Ethan James sat outside watching the activity. "I think your mother would be proud of us today," said Richard. "I'm sure she is," replied Ethan James, touching the locket. "And I think she's happy because we managed to create something beautiful together. You know what else? I think I finally understood what your mother meant when she wrote that love never ends. It just changes form." "What do you mean?" "The love I felt for her transformed into the love I feel for you. And the love she felt for me turned into the love she planted in your heart. It's all connected." Ethan James smiled. "It's like a circle that never ends." "Exactly. And now we're going to pass that love forward by helping other children and other families." 2 years had passed since the day Richard found Ethan James at the shelter. Their lives had been completely transformed. Richard had become a more affectionate, present, and humane man. Ethan James had become a confident, studious boy, full of plans and dreams for the future. Every Sunday they visited the tomb Richard had commissioned for Samantha, even without a body to bury. It was a beautiful place, with always fresh flowers, where they could go talk to her and share the week's news. "Hi, Mom," Ethan James would say every time they arrived. "I came to tell you about my week." And then he would talk about his school grades, his friends, the projects at the shelter, about everything a mother would want to know about her son's life. Richard also spoke with Samantha, asking for advice on how to raise Ethan James, sharing the joys and worries of being a grandfather. "I hope I'm doing everything right," he always said at the end of their visits. "I hope I'm being the father you needed me to be with our boy." One Sunday afternoon, after one of these visits, Ethan James asked a question that surprised Richard. "Grandpa, are you happy?" "Of course I am. Why do you ask?" "It's just that sometimes I see you staring into space with a sad face, and I wonder if you're not sad because of my mum." Richard pulled the car over to the shoulder and looked at his grandson. "Ethan James, I'll tell you the truth. Yes, I miss your mum very much. I feel sadness for everything we lost, for all the years we didn't spend together. But do you know what I feel more than sadness?" "What?" "Gratitude. Gratitude for having you in my life. Gratitude that your mum raised such a special boy. Gratitude that we found each other. Sadness is part of love, Ethan James. We feel sad because we love deeply, but that doesn't mean we're not happy." Ethan James reflected on his grandfather's words. "I understand. It's like me with the locket. Sometimes I feel sad looking at my mum's picture, but I also feel happy because she's with me." "Exactly. Feelings aren't simple. We can feel several things at the same time. And I'm grateful too, Grandpa." "Grateful for what?" "For you finding me, for giving me a family, for teaching me that family love is the most important thing in the world." Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. "You're the one who taught me that, my grandson. You're the one who showed me what really matters in life." That night before bed, Ethan James called Richard to his room. "Grandpa, can I give you something?" "Of course." Ethan James took off a new chain from his neck, different from the old locket. It had 2 pendants, one with Samantha's picture and another with a photo of the 2 of them together. "I had it made for you. This way my mom can watch over both of us at the same time." Richard was speechless. He carefully took the chain and put it around his neck. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received in my life. Now we're a truly complete family. You, me, and her. Yes, we are, and we always will be." In the years that followed, Richard and Ethan James built a life full of love, companionship, and purpose. Richard had learned to be both father and grandfather at the same time. Ethan James had become a responsible young man, studious, and with a huge heart for helping others. The shelter's library grew into a larger project, expanding to other shelters in the city. Ethan James, even though still a teenager, became a small activist for the cause of orphaned children, always encouraged by his grandfather. "You have your mother's heart," Richard would say whenever he saw his grandson helping someone. "And my grandfather's stubbornness. Ethan James would reply, joking. Richard's company also changed. He implemented social programs, created scholarships for underprivileged youth, and turned part of the profits into social responsibility projects. He told the employees that he had learned that true success is measured by the good one does for others. One day, when Ethan James was already 15, they were organizing things in the attic when they found a box that neither of them remembered seeing before. "What do you think is in here?" asked Ethan James, curious. Inside the box were letters, many letters, all addressed to Richard, but they had never reached their destination. "They're letters from your mother," said Richard, immediately recognizing the handwriting. "But how did they get here?" Richard examined the envelopes. All had postal stamps indicating address not found or moved away. "I changed apartments several times after she left home. These letters must have gotten lost in the postal system and arrived here when they managed to track down my current address." "Can we read them?" "Yes, we can." They spent the whole afternoon reading the letters. There were about 30, written over several years. In the first ones, Samantha talked about the pregnancy, about how she was anxious and scared but happy. In the following ones, she spoke about Ethan James's birth, about how he was beautiful and intelligent. In the last ones, she told about financial difficulties, about the illness, about how Ethan James was growing up and looking more and more like his grandfather. They all ended with the same phrase, "Dad, I love you and hope that one day we can be a family again." "She never stopped loving you," said Ethan James, moved, "and I never stopped loving her. If I had received these letters—" "It doesn't matter anymore, Grandpa. What matters is that now we know she always wanted you to reconcile. And you reconciled through me." In the last letter there was something different. Samantha had written it when she was already very ill. "Dad, this may be the last letter I write. I am very sick and don't know how much time I have left. I will leave Ethan James in a safe place until I get better, but I'm afraid I will never get better. If something happens to me, I want you to know that I hold no grudges in my heart. I understand why you were angry with me, and I know you were trying to protect me. I was the one who was too stubborn to accept your advice. Ethan James is a wonderful boy. He has your intelligence, your sense of justice, and your stubbornness too. If one day you learn of his existence, please take care of him. Tell him about our family, about you, about how we were before the fight. Teach him that sometimes people drift apart, not because they don't love each other, but because they love too much and don't know how to show it. Teach him that pride is the enemy of love, and that asking for forgiveness is an act of courage, not weakness. Dad, I forgive you for everything, and I hope you forgive me too. I want you to be happy and find a way to fill your heart with love again. If you take care of Ethan James, know that you will be taking care of me too. He carries all the good that was in me and all the good that was in you. With all my eternal love, your daughter Samantha." When Richard finished reading, both he and Ethan James were crying. "She knew this would happen," whispered Ethan James. "She knew you would find me." "Your mother was always very intelligent. She planned everything so that we would meet. That's why she taught me so much about family and forgiveness, so I would be prepared to meet you." Richard hugged his grandson, moved. "She gave us the greatest gift possible. She gave us each other." That night, the two decided to write a letter to Samantha, a letter telling about how their lives had changed, about how they had become a family, about all the projects they were developing together. "Dear Samantha, we found your letters today, and we finally understand how everything connects. You orchestrated our meeting perfectly, preparing Ethan James to accept me and preparing me to be worthy of him. I want you to know that I am taking care of him exactly as you asked. He is growing up strong, intelligent, kind. He has your generous heart and your concern for others. Together we created a library in your honor, helped dozens of children, and built a family based on love and forgiveness. Ethan James taught me to be a better man, and I hope I'm teaching him to be the extraordinary man you dreamed he would be. Daughter, I ask for your forgiveness for everything. For being proud, for saying harsh words, for missing precious years of your life and my grandson's life. But I also thank you for giving me the chance to be a grandfather, for raising such a special boy, for teaching me that love is stronger than any fight. We love you forever. Dad Richard, and Ethan James. They kept the letter with the others, in a special box that would always remain in Ethan James's room. On his 16th birthday, Ethan James made an unusual request to Richard. "Grandpa, I want to have a party, but not in the usual way." "What do you mean?" "I want to have the party at the shelter, for all the children, and I want the theme to be families finding each other." "That's a beautiful idea, but why?" "Because my greatest birthday gift was finding you. And I want other children to feel hopeful that they too can find their families." The party was an absolute success. Over 100 people attended, including families who had already adopted children from the shelter, staff, volunteers, and community members. Ethan James gave an emotional speech about the importance of never giving up hope. 3 years ago, I was just an orphan boy sleeping while hugging a locket. Today, I am a son, a grandson, and part of a family that loves me. If it happened to me, it can happen to any of you. Several families expressed interest in getting to know the shelter's children better that night. In the following months, 5 children found new homes. "Your mother would be so proud," said Richard when they learned about the adoptions. "I'm just continuing the work she started with me." "What do you mean?" "She taught me that love multiplies when it's shared. Now I'm sharing with other children the love I received from her and from you." When Ethan James turned 18, he took the entrance exam for psychology. He wanted to work with orphan children and help families reunite. "I'm sure you'll be an amazing psychologist," said Richard on the day of the results. "I learned from the best teachers, you and my mother." During college, Ethan James continued living with Richard and helping with the family's social projects. He wrote his thesis on the importance of family bonds in the identity formation of orphaned children, drawing on his own experience and the cases he had followed. On graduation day, Richard was in the audience, emotional, holding a photo of Samantha. "This is for you, daughter," he whispered to the photo. "Your boy has become an extraordinary man." After the ceremony, Ethan James sought him out. "Grandpa, I want to give you something." It was a framed diploma, but not his. It was an honorary diploma that the university had created especially for Richard, recognizing his social work. "Ethan James, what is this?" "I asked the university to create this diploma for you." "Richard Parker, Dr. Honoris Causa in Family Love. Because you taught me that it's never too late to learn to love truly." Richard couldn't hold back his tears. "Thank you, my grandson. This is the most important diploma I've ever received. And I want to give you something else." Ethan James took the old locket from his pocket. "I don't need to be afraid of forgetting my mother's face anymore. She lives in every gesture I make, in every word you say, in every person we help. I want you to keep the locket now." "But Ethan James..." "Grandpa, you carried the guilt for 15 years. Now it's time to carry forgiveness. My mother isn't in this photo. She's in our family, in our projects, in the love we've built together." Richard took the locket with trembling hands. "Thank you, Ethan James. I'll always keep it." "And Grandpa?" "Yes?" "My mother wanted me to tell you that she's proud of you. I dreamed about her last night, and that's what she said." Richard hugged him tightly, knowing he had finally become the father Samantha had always wanted him to be. 10 years later, Richard was in his office when he received a call that would change everything again. "Grandpa, can you come to the hospital?" It was Ethan James's voice, but it sounded different. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm great. Actually, I'm better than great. Just come, okay?" Richard rushed to the hospital, worried. When he arrived, he found Ethan James in the maternity ward hallway with the biggest smile he had ever seen. "Grandpa, I want you to meet someone." He led Richard to the nursery and pointed to a tiny baby with dark hair. "This is Samuel White Parker, my son, your great-grandson." Richard was speechless. Ethan James had married Emily, a fellow psychologist, 2 years earlier, but they hadn't told anyone about the pregnancy to make it a surprise. "My great-grandson," whispered Richard, moved. "And look at the name we chose. Samuel, in honor of my mother. White, in honor of my mother's family. And Parker, because we are a family that found each other again. Can I hold him?" "Of course you can, great-grandpa." When Richard picked up the baby, he felt as if the story was coming full circle. There was the fourth generation of the family, the future that Samantha had planted when she decided to have Ethan James. "Hi, Samuel," he whispered to the baby. "I'm your great-grandfather, Richard, and I'm going to tell you all the stories of our family, especially the story of your grandmother, Samantha, who was the bravest woman who ever lived." The baby opened his green eyes, just like Samantha's, and seemed to look directly at Richard. "He has her eyes," murmured Richard. "And he'll have her heart too, I'll make sure of that." That night, Richard went home and opened the drawer where he kept the locket. He took out a photo of the whole family together, him, Ethan James, Emily, and the baby, and placed it next to the photo of Samantha. "There you go, daughter," he said aloud. "Our family is complete again. You planted a seed of love that grew and bore fruit. Samuel will grow up knowing he is loved by generations, and he will carry forward all the good you taught." 5 years passed. Samuel had become a happy, intelligent, and energetic child. Richard, now 80 years old, spent his days playing with his great-grandson and telling family stories. "Great-grandpa, tell me the story of Grandma Samantha again," Samuel would ask every night before bed. And Richard would tell it. He told of a brave woman who had loved her son so much that she was capable of any sacrifice for him. He told of a proud man who almost lost everything because he didn't know how to ask for forgiveness. He told of a boy who slept hugging a locket and who saved an entire family just by existing. "Is Grandma Samantha in heaven?" Samuel asked one night. "Grandma Samantha is everywhere there is love, my little grandson. She is in your daddy's smile, in the stories I tell, in the affection you feel for each other. Love never dies. It just changes form. Like Mommy will be too, if she goes to heaven." "Exactly. The love of special people stays with us forever." One morning, Richard woke up more tired than usual. It had been a restless night, dreaming of Samantha. In the dream, she appeared young and smiling, thanking him for taking such good care of Ethan James. "Dad, you did everything right," she had said in the dream. "Now you can rest." Richard had breakfast with the family, played with Samuel in the garden, and in the afternoon sat in his favorite armchair to rest. When Ethan James came home from work, he found his grandfather sleeping peacefully, with the locket in his hands and a serene smile on his face. Richard's funeral was a celebration of life, not a moment of sadness. Hundreds of people attended. Children he had helped find families, company employees, volunteers from social projects, lifelong friends. Ethan James gave the main speech. "My grandfather Richard Parker was a man who learned it's never too late to ask for forgiveness, never too late to love, and never too late to be the person we should be. He saved my life when he found me at the shelter, but I know that actually I was the one who saved his life, because he had gotten lost in pain and pride and found his way back through love." After the burial, the family gathered for the reading of the will. Richard had left most of his estate to social projects, but had set aside some special items for Ethan James and Samuel. For Ethan James, he left all of Samantha's letters and a book he had written in secret. For Ethan James, memories of an imperfect grandfather who learned to love. For Samuel, he left the locket and a letter. "My dear great-grandson, when you grow up and read this letter, you will already be a young man. I want you to know that you were born from a love story that spanned generations. Your grandmother Samantha was the bravest woman I ever knew. Your father, Ethan James, is the kindest man who ever existed. And you, my little Samuel, are proof that love always finds a way to continue. Never forget, our family is made of people who made mistakes, who forgave each other, who found each other again, and who chose love above all else. You carry this story in your blood and in your heart. Be brave like your grandmother, be kind like your father. And if one day you make mistakes like I did, remember that it's always possible to ask for forgiveness and start over. The locket you're inheriting isn't just a piece of jewelry. It's a symbol that love survives everything: anger, time, pain, even departure. Take care of it, and one day pass on to your children the story of how a family got lost and found each other again through a boy who slept hugging a locket. With all my eternal love, your great-grandfather Richard." Years later, when Samuel turned 18, Ethan James gave him the locket and told him the whole family story. The young man listened carefully, moved by every detail. "Dad, it's amazing how everything connects. If great-grandfather hadn't gone to the shelter that day..." "But he did. And do you know why? Because your grandmother Samantha, even from where she was, guided him to me. Love has a strength we don't understand, son. It always finds a way to bring together those who need to be together." Samuel carefully took the locket and opened it. There was Samantha's photo, a bit more faded, but still recognizable. "Hi, Grandma," he whispered. "I'm Samuel. I came to thank you for starting this story." That same year, Samuel decided to study law, specializing in children's rights. He wanted to continue the family's work, but in a different way, through laws, fighting for other orphaned children to have more chances to find families. During college, he wrote a bill that created incentives for adoption and support programs for blended families. The bill was approved and became known as the Samantha White Parker Act. On the day the law was signed, Ethan James was in the audience, proud of his son. When Samuel gave his speech explaining the origin of the law's name, there wasn't a single person who wasn't moved. This law bears the name of Samantha White Parker, my grandmother, a woman I never met personally, but who changed my life through the love she planted in our family. She taught that every child deserves a family, and every family deserves a chance to reconnect with love. After the ceremony, father and son visited Richard's grave and Samantha's memorial. "We did it, Grandpa," said Samuel, touching Richard's headstone. "The story that began with a locket has now become law. Thousands of children will have better chances of finding families because of our story." Ethan James smiled, knowing Richard would be proud. "Your grandmother and great-grandfather are happy, son. We transformed our pain into purpose, our story into hope for others." That night at home, Samuel wrote in his diary, "Today I signed into law an act born from a love story. It all started with an argument between father and daughter, continued with an orphan boy sleeping while hugging a locket, went through a businessman who learned to ask for forgiveness and reached me, a young man who never met his grandmother but carries her in his heart. I learned that families aren't perfect. They argue, separate, make mistakes. But when true love exists, there's always a way to reunite. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it happens through other people, but love always finds a way. My grandmother Samantha planted a seed when she had my father. My great-grandfather Richard watered that seed when he decided to ask for forgiveness. My father Ethan James made it grow when he chose to share love instead of holding grudges. And now I'm harvesting the fruits, turning our family story into hope for other families. The locket I carry is no longer just a memory of those who are gone. It's a symbol that love is eternal, that families can heal, and that each of us has the power to write happy endings for stories that seemed lost. Thank you, Grandma Samantha, for starting all this. Thank you, great-grandfather Richard, for having the courage to start over. Thank you, Dad, for teaching me that love multiplies when shared. Our story proves that it's never too late for love to win. And so, what began with a boy sleeping while hugging a locket became a legacy of love that crossed generations, touched thousands of lives, and proved that the greatest victories come not from perfection, but from forgiveness. The Parker family had learned that true love isn't what never faces difficulties, but what finds strength to rise after every fall. And that the best stories are those where characters make mistakes, feel remorse, ask for forgiveness, and choose love above all. The locket still passes from generation to generation, carrying within it not just the photo of a courageous woman, but proof that when two people truly love each other, not even death can separate them forever. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of Richard and Ethan's story. Do you believe it's never too late to ask for forgiveness? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.